Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar. We're talking about something that both Ann and I are really excited about today, inbound marketing websites. And we actually have this checklist put together to hopefully make this a little bit more doable and really able to segment this out into chunks that are actionable right away. I'm Becky Vardaman, delighted to be here, and with me is Ann Olson, Converge Consulting's founder and CEO.
And Becky is the Vice President of Strategy at Converge.
Oh, thanks.
Over the last 4 years, Converge has been a real pioneer in inbound marketing. It's what our people are passionate about and what we love to talk about. Our firm has partnered with HubSpot, who is one of the leaders in inbound marketing across the world, actually. And we focus on digital analytics, inbound marketing, research, and brand. We work with nearly 65 colleges a year to help them with their inbound marketing efforts. So what is inbound marketing? Oftentimes when we're writing blog posts or speaking at conferences, we'll start with really putting together a common definition. And that common definition is very similar to your recruitment funnel. So when we think about inbound marketing, we're thinking about how do we get prospective students to raise their hand as strangers? How do we attract them, convert them, and delight them? So again, thinking through that recruitment funnel, how do we attract them as strangers? Through our SEO efforts, through content creation, social media, and digital advertising, which all of us colleges are doing at all points in time. How do we take those strangers, and once we get them to that center of our marketing strategy, our website, how do we really create a great user experience for the visitor using calls to action, effective landing pages, and forms? And then once we get them further along into that funnel to the point of application and as an admitted student, how do we keep them engaged through segmented content, ongoing engagement, and a fabulous user experience so they become successful alumni? So thinking about those 3 phases of inbound marketing: attract, convert, and delight. And as I mentioned before, your website really should be the hub of your marketing strategy. And when we think about an inbound marketing website, we really think about all the activities that you're completing, whether it's digital advertising or blogging, virtual events, on-campus events, delivering of printed communications, brochures, and email marketing, all driving to that center, that epicenter of your marketing communications, which is your website.
All right, so how do we actually take the website we have now and make sure that it's the most effective inbound website possible? We put together this checklist for you. This is actually an infographic out on our website right now, so go out there and look at it if you want to follow along. I've got the URL a little bit later in the slides for you. Digital advertising, brand and design, search engine optimization or SEO, Google Analytics, content development, and recruitment are all going to be critical pieces to make sure that your website is really functioning at the highest level for inbound. So let's take a look at each one of these things. For each one of these, we've got 3 questions that we want you to ask yourself. Let's start with digital advertising. Are you monitoring your effectiveness of your efforts? Do you know your audience and how to reach them best with channels? And do you have a strategic plan for your budget? So we all know that monitoring is really cool right now, right? One of the hottest trends out there is to have all these fancy wrist monitors to monitor every step and every type of oxygen level in your blood. So we want to keep track of everything. And why do we want to keep track of things? Because whatever we monitor and whatever we track, we can improve on those things. So obviously, if you're doing digital advertising and you're spending money there, we're going to want to make sure that you can track that and improve it. So how do we actually do that? There's a lot of tools. Google Analytics is a tool that you can use for this. You have a lot of information coming in, and especially with things like AdWords, it can automatically send information into your analytics of your website. Most of the different platforms out there that you're going to work with advertising will have some kind of conversion tracking, whether it's AdWords or Facebook or Twitter. Conversion tracking basically means you can put a little snippet of code on, like, say, a thank you page if you're trying to get somebody to fill out a form. And if that person comes through your ad, fills out the form, and hits that thank you page, it's going to count as a conversion. What's great about things like AdWords is you look at this example here on the right. This is actually AdWords reporting. you can see that there's converted clicks in the second column from the right. AdWords is smart enough to actually change some of the bidding on the fly. So being able to use this conversion tracking is a fantastic way to make sure you're getting the most out of your digital advertising. And then, of course, there's in-tool reporting for just about any tool out there that you're going to use for advertising. All the social media networks have some reporting, and you can use some additional add-on reports as well. So what are we looking for when you're actually going through this information? Of course, we're looking for a return on investment, right? So what are you counting as a conversion? As I mentioned, it might make sense on a landing page to count a thank you page. It might make sense to track somebody who has clicked on an apply button or a request information button, or maybe gotten to the thank you page there. So think about really deep down, what is it that you want people to do on your website with this advertising, and how can you track that thing? As well as then you're going to dig in and say, okay, which of my channels are converting best now that we know what a conversion is? That's really going to help you be able to understand where you can put more dollars for the highest return on investment going forward.
And as we're working and thinking about working with clients, as we look at ROI, we want to be able to answer the question of what did it cost for my inquiry? What did it cost for someone to, what did it take, what level of investment did it take for someone to come and give me their first name, their last name, and their email, and raise their hand and let us know that they're interested. So we are less concerned about cost per click and click-through rate, and much more concerned about what was that cost per inquiry. One other thing is you're thinking about measurement, making sure that you're looking at your measurement across channels. There's a great tool called Acquisio that we use in monitoring and working on digital advertising campaigns with our clients. And the best part about Acquisio is not only do I know what my cost per inquiry is, but I also know how effective each channel might be, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, AdWords, or Bing. And the great thing about that is you can make modifications because you have that data and know what's working best.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, I think I've got an example we can show you in a moment. Everybody likes that tool. It's fantastic. Digital advertising, the second one here, the second question. Do you know your audience and the best channels to reach them? So obviously, you're not going to see, if you're trying to recruit adult students coming back, you're probably not going to try to recruit them on Snapchat. Maybe you are. Most likely you're not going to. Just as if you're trying to recruit for somebody who has a certain degree level, you want to really find the place that, if you're trying to get them to come back for an MBA, for example, you want to find the place that you can easily target people who have the degree level that you need to reach. So first, figure out which target you're going after. You're probably going to create a couple of different segments, whether you're looking at alumni, the degree level I mentioned, maybe it's a specific interest because you're trying to market a specific program. And you really want to look for people who are interested in children and teaching, if it's an education degree, something like that. So figure out where you want to start, and then start looking at the different platforms that are out there and what the options are for targeting. Facebook, which is the example you see here pulled up to the right, has tons of different things that we can target advertising by, with whether it's location, age, gender, precise interests or broad category interests, and different types of devices as well. LinkedIn is a great one for any of those graduate programs because you can target right down to the type of degree and type of job title that somebody might have. Or if you're looking for alumni, LinkedIn is great as well because you can target to the school that someone might have graduated from. Ready-made alumni, right?
Yeah, a great example of this the other day is we were looking to identify segments of populations to target for a gap year program. And we determined that utilizing Facebook to target parents with a certain household income was a good way in which to reach that audience. So as Becky mentioned, you can get really specific with the different criteria you use for targeting.
Yep. And another great tool that's here that I've got listed very last is remarketing. If anybody hasn't used remarketing, it's definitely worth checking out. Basically what that means is that you're going to send advertising, whether it be through Facebook or AdWords or display advertising, to people who have already shown an interest by coming to your website, and it can be set up on specific pages. So this is a really great way. Not only can you go right down to the interest, but you can be interested in me, basically, is the only thing you're going to spend money on ads for. So that's a really nice one. So let's talk about your strategic plan. You have a budget. Everyone's budget is not as large as we'd like it to be. So how are you sure that you're spending it in the right places? As Anne mentioned before, it's great to have a tool like the one we use here is called Acquisio, written at the top there, to plug all of these different channels into one place where you can see them all compare against each other. Because otherwise you're really going around and trying to dig in to lots of different reports. I mentioned every one of these tools has their own reporting software for the most part. So it's nice to have them all together in one place to see what channels are really performing the best. You could also put together a manual dashboard of your own, at least monthly, to figure out what things are really converting the best. Brand and design. Our 3 questions here. Do you have brand standards and a style guide in place? Is your website a visual representation of your brand? And are your designs compelling and interesting? And I hear a couple of gulps. So what are your brand standards, and do you have a style guide? If any of anybody's worked in a big corporate setting before, like Coca-Cola, you know that there are lots of different variations of the logo, and you've probably even met some of the brand police. I happen to be married to one. So if you're putting together your brand standards, what types of things should you include in this? Strategic brand elements. So this is a great way to figure out what your brand really is, who you are, and how you're going to talk about yourself in a consistent way across all of your different communications. You want to make sure you have the correct logo usage. People do notice if the logo is treated in different weird ways, and they might think that you're not really you. Colors, fonts, any graphical element guidance that you might want to give. Think we only want to show these types of this age group, or we want to show them doing these active things with this type of technology, those sorts of things. Voice and tone, which is really understanding how we talk about ourselves, including a copywriting guide. Many of you have probably talked about, what are we, this school of law or this law school, right? So figuring out those things and being consistent. Any imagery you plan on using, and actually providing some examples here is a great thing to do as well. So here you see on the right an example of some of this information, how we talk about dates, how we talk about titles, things like that.
We do a lot of work with business and graduate schools, and those schools can be very tricky because they have the larger university brand, but they also have oftentimes a beneficiary or someone who is named the school and given money on their behalf. And figuring out not only how that's addressed in the logo, but figuring out, as Becky mentioned, how that's addressed throughout the copy and whether the formal name is used consistently or how we talk about and reference the institution is incredibly important. And every day we see more and more examples of this, and it's never too late to start to have these conversations about what should our brand standards and design look like consistently, both across each school and across the institution, and how can we be consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're thinking about your brand and design, this really fits from an inbound marketing perspective into all 3 of those facets that we talked about earlier. It's good to be consistent when you're attracting people, converting them, and then really delighting them in making sure that everything is consistent and that you have a consistent voice throughout all of your brand messaging. All right, so some of us probably have had this experience. Your website may or may not be a complete visual representation of your brand. I might have stole this. It wouldn't be a Converge webinar without a Life of Pi reference, right? So does your campus is probably a wonderful, beautiful place that's really fun and there's amazing things happening. You want to make sure that your website is representing that. I don't know how many times we've begun work on a website redesign project, and that was one of the #1 drivers of the work being done. That we know we have an amazing campus here and amazing students, and we're doing amazing things that are impacting the world. We just haven't been able to get over the hump and really share that with the world through the web yet. I like that cat. He's so grumpy. So let's talk about your designs. They should be compelling and they should be interesting, just like your campus, right? So some things that you might do in order to prove or disprove this. Many of you are probably nodding or shaking your head right now saying, yes, we know that our designs are not as compelling as they could be. Or maybe you think, yeah, we have some great designs. But that's just a focus group of one, right? So you want to make sure that you're doing a full focus group and bringing in prospective students or bringing in your prospective audience, alumni, whomever it might be. You can also do some user testing during that time period. Interviewing your different stakeholders on campus is not only a great way to get some valuable information that you might not have known as far as what's being represented on your website and how to make it more compelling, but it's also a great way to build some buy-in across different departments and silos. You can also utilize some design experts and bring them in to do some different mock-ups for you. And of course, analytics. So here's an example of some of the different things that you might be able to look at. You might have a focus group of people that say, yes, we're absolutely excited about this and we love this website, but it's really the actions of people on your site that's going to be the true test. So figure out where people are spending time, how much time they're spending on different sections of your site, what they're clicking on through either in-page analytics or event tagging, which I prefer. So there's some great tools out there to help you tell the story, I guess, on whether or not your site really is compelling, because what's compelling to one person might not be to another.
And I think the most important part about investigating and further determining if your brand and design are effective is really getting in front of and asking those users. So not only using the quantitative information that Becky shared here with analytics, but sitting down with groups of 3 to 4 to 5 students or audience members and assigning them some tasks to see how they navigate your site. And as we think about attracting, converting, and delighting, how are we converting people through that user path on our website? Our brand and design should be effective and helpful in allowing us to do that.
Great. So let's talk about SEO, search engine optimization. Hopefully some of you have done some keyword research in the past. We're going to talk about that for a moment. We also want to encourage you to execute a technical crawl of your website and see what kind of issues might be there kind of hiding underneath the surface. And then finally, hopefully you're monitoring all of this. So again, you can prove that it's working and continue to improve it. So keyword research has a long history in the SEO industry. It's been one of the tactics from the get-go. But I want to talk about some tools that you can use to maybe get that done. Keyword Planner from Google is a free tool. You have to have an account, but just make one. It's all free. And this is a great tool, especially because Google is really the leading search engine out there. So some of the groupings and the themes that they put together for ad groups are going to really speak to how they're also theming and grouping words in search. So being able to use those ad groups and figuring out some words that really line up together there within the Google Keyword Planner tool is going to be a real benefit. So we usually start there and we think about all the different ways we can search for something and get tons and tons and tons of keywords to test with that Keyword Planner tool. Second, we use something called the Moz Keyword Difficulty and SERP, which stands for Search Engine Results Page Analysis Tool. This is a tool that basically gives us, and I have a screen grab of it on the next slide, but it gives you a lot of data to be able to judge those keywords to see which ones are the best and will be the better ones for you to try to go after. And we're doing all this to try to build what we call related themes. We do thematic keyword research so that if words are really closely grouped together, we're still going to show up on different types of long tail keyword searches. Google is getting so smart, especially with lots more mobile search. In the last couple of years, it's gotten to the point where you really want to tell Google what your page is about, and a lot of the long tail things will take care of themselves as long as you have those nice thick themes. You can see here down an example. This is just the way that Google thinks in a lot of different ways, whether it is the Keyword Planner ad groups or even on just your regular search engine result page. It's going to automatically make some suggestions to you. So Google's smart enough to know that some of these different words and terms and phrases are related. So I wouldn't be too concerned about whether or not you have an S, the plural, on the end of one of your keywords. So use your common sense. Try to search like real users would search.
And that's also where you can use some of those focus groups and those users to better understand what actual words they are searching for when they're using Google and trying to find your website.
That's a great point. This is an example of what the keyword difficulty and SERP analysis tool looks like from Moz. basically you plug in a bunch of words there, 20 at a time, and it's going to kick out for you a percentage, which is your keyword difficulty, volume for local and global. And the thing that I really like about this tool that's different than just the regular AdWords tool is the keyword difficulty rating here is going to be based on search engine results and the other organic search, versus if you're doing that and getting the keyword difficulty out of the AdWords tool, it's going to be about paid search difficulty and competition. So this is a little bit more true to the source, I guess. Another Moz tool that we like to use is we run a crawl on site, the technical crawl. Moz, M-O-Z, is the name of the company, and they're basically the godfathers of SEO in the industry. They started out as a consulting firm and moved into a software firm, and really have done a lot of research to kind of reverse engineer how the Google algorithms work. So these are the guys that, and they do a great job of sharing and teaching too, which is I think why they're so well known. But basically what they do is they create their own little version of the Google bot with all of this research they've done, and they send that out on your website. And it crawls every link on your site, link to link to link, and it records anything that they think that Google probably wouldn't like. We categorize them into high, medium, and low priority issues. So the high ones are the ones obviously you want to get started on first. It's things like duplicate page content, your 404 errors, 500 type errors, any titles that are missing, things like that. And then you'll have your medium group in there in the middle with your missing metadata, duplicate page titles, etc. So what you really find here, though, is a lot of things that on the surface you might not see as being wrong with your site. You might not realize that your site has all this duplicate page content, which search engines look down upon, and they're not really sure how to rank you, and sometimes they actually don't rank you at all. But maybe you have like a www non-www issue where the same page renders with and without that dub. That's going to end up being duplicate content, and you probably would never know about it unless you did a crawl like this.
Absolutely. Moz, like Becky said, is a great place for resources, and they probably get our Gold Star Award for being really great inbound marketers. They provide a ton of thought leadership, lots of great videos, as well as answers to questions on their site. So if you're working on SEO on your campus, definitely check them out as a resource.
All right, so are you actually monitoring any of your efforts? I promise this won't be an entire Moz show, but there's one of the tools that they have is this pro tool that you can actually monitor how your different organic search is coming and the breakdown by search engines, etc. It also does some social media monitoring. This is a paid tool, but it's really rather affordable. There are a couple other tools out there that are paid as well. You don't need to use a paid tool, though. You can use Google Analytics, free tool, and check on your organic search. If I were to click on that organic search, it would break it down by the specific search engines. And the cool thing about doing this with analytics is it can be tied into your goals, which is the second arrow over there on the right. And you can make sure that you're looking at which organic sources are really contributing to your goal conversions. So again, things like filling out a form, contacting you, applying, requesting information, donating, all of those things that you really want people to come and do on your website. You can figure out how your organic search is directly contributing to those things. Google Analytics.
Now Becky's very favorite topic.
So if I was going to ask you 3 questions to make sure that you have an inbound site with great Google Analytics on it, I would first ask if you have your goals set up, if you're using dashboards to check on that reporting on a regular basis, and of course, if you've transitioned to Universal Analytics. If anybody was on my last webinar last month about Universal Analytics, you know that that's a big and exciting thing coming down the line here. If you weren't on it, please go watch it on our site. So first things first, are you setting up goals? I just talked a little bit about goals in the last couple of slides on whether or not your goals are converting, right? So we usually like to walk people through an analytics framework when we're thinking about how to set up goals on a site. So think about one specific audience, perhaps prospective students, and then go through these 5 different items. What is your business objective for that prospective student? So why do you have a website? In that case, it might be that you want to get butts in seats. You want people in your institution, right, attending classes. So what's your website goal? What do you want users to do on your website that show that they've met that other objective? Well, we probably want them to apply, right? We want them to actually go onto our site and fill out the application. So on the KPI, how are we going to actually track that? What specific website action can we track that shows that they've done this? So a thank you page of an application would be a great example here. I've actually completed the application. A page view to that thank you page is a great place to count a goal. Then I want you to think a little bit harder about targets. So what is our target number for this goal? We want to actually make this thing measurable and try to improve it. So whether it's a percentage of your overall enrollment goal, or whether it's a specific number increased just specific to your website, both of those things would be fine. And then finally, segments. There's a tool within analytics called an advanced segment that lets you dig in a little bit deeper. So what type of audience segments would really help you better analyze your success? I always recommend that you look at traffic sources. So for example, the last example we did with SEO. Are people coming from organic? Are they coming from social media? Are they coming from your paid advertisements that we talked about earlier? Any way you can segment your data a little bit deeper to understand where you're really getting some success that you can capitalize on is going to be beneficial.
Absolutely. And as you think about your admissions, whether it's graduate or undergraduate or for a specific school, one of the best places to start is to think about those action activities that you want someone to do on your site. So as you think about attracting them to your site, converting them, and then keeping them engaged, 3 great goals to set up in Google Analytics are on your inquiry form, your campus visit form when they sign up to visit campus, and then on that application. And that will provide you with some really great benchmark data month to month as well as year over year.
Absolutely. And just a little bit more detail on how you can actually set those up in case anybody is looking at me going, did she just try to fit an entire workshop into a slide? Kind of, I did. This is an example of how you actually set up the goal. And there's 4 different ways you can set up a goal. So you can use a URL destination, like I mentioned, the thank you page. You can use duration. So if somebody spends a certain number of minutes or seconds on your website, when they reach that duration, it'll count as a goal conversion. Pages or screens per session. So the number of pages, when they reach, X number of pages, 3 pages, it'll become a goal conversion. Or you can set them up on events. And I won't go too much into events, but events is like if you want to set up a tracking on a video or an offsite link or an email address, things like that can all be tagged in with event tagging, and then you can use them for goal conversions.
And for that, an example of utilizing the duration and the pages per session, oftentimes we'll work with institutions who are trying to measure alumni engagement. And in setting a goal for how many minutes they visited your site, your alumni, as well as the number of pages they visited, is a really helpful goal that you have the ability to get some quantifiable data on.
So now that you've got goals mastered and you completely know what you're going to go set up on your site, you really should consider having some dashboards set up so that you can get current and consistent visibility into how those are reporting. Dashboards are really pretty simple to set up, and they're wonderful because they're very shareable. So if you're doing any reporting for reporting up or down the chain or across for any stakeholders, it's a great way to send that information. You can export these as a PDF. You can share them through, through a link, or you can set up an email that can go on a very regular basis. We actually get one daily because we're kind of data nerds around here about what's going on our site. So you can send out, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly emails on a regular basis to people. Where would you want to start when you're setting up different dashboards? The goals that we talked about previously is a great place to start. If it's important enough to set up a goal around it, it's important enough for you to be looking at it on a regular basis. Any current reporting you're doing, you can replace that with a dashboard, and it'll really, really help on your workload so that you don't have to be doing that every week or every month. We also like to set up these for content-heavy sections of the site, so blogs and news, to understand how your content is really working and whether it's effective or not. And then send those off to your content contributors. If you have people writing or editing pages across the institution, it's nice for those people to have some kind of direct data to understand how they can make things better. If you have a specific campaign that you're working on, you can set up a dashboard for that. So for example, if we're doing a campaign that is our fall 2015 campaign and we send out an email about it, and then we also put some Facebook advertisements out there, and then we tweeted about it, we can tag all of those different interactions with something called campaign tracking. And as it comes back to your website, we can pull that all together into one pretty dashboard for you that you can understand what's going on with that specific campaign. This is also great for traffic sources, so social, paid media, referrals, or organic, and inbound marketing process, of course. So we actually have dashboards on our site that we look at frequently that it's how people are getting to our website, attracting, how they're converting on our goals, and the engagement type metrics about how they're delighted, hopefully, with our site. Transitioning to universal analytics. Let me just give you kind of the summary of this. And again, I just did a full hour webinar in this if you want more details, which is live on our site. So first thing, it's time. Google has not promised to process data of any of the older systems. Universal Analytics is the latest and greatest. It's been out of beta for about a year and a half now. And it's really going to have some great new features. So it's an exciting thing. The problem is Google doesn't want to continue to maintain and process the asynchronous and the traditional codes. So you really do need to get on board. They haven't given us a hard deadline, but they said you have about 2 years after the initial push. So I would really try to focus on having 2015 be the year. I think 2015 is a good, safe year. I'd feel comfortable if you moved by then. I get a little bit nervous after that. It's exciting. Well, that first bullet point sounds a little daunting. It's actually really, really exciting. There's really new, cool things coming. There's demographic information. There's user ID uploads and dimension widening. There's all these sorts of opportunities to get lots more information and data that previously we never were able to do. You actually can get to the point where we can see across different devices, if I'm the same user on my cell phone and on my iPad and on my work computer, I can be tracked as one user as long as I'm logged in with Universal. So that's a fantastic new feature that's going to enable a lot of more analysis going forward. I've also seen this be a real opportunity for a lot of schools. They're making this transition, which really is, the transition itself consists of pushing a button in the back end of analytics and swapping out the code. So you have the most updated code on your website. So really the transition isn't enormous, but I love to see schools take this opportunity to really make sure that their analytics are set up correctly, make sure that they've got the right goals set up for the right people that are doing the analysis, and use it as a driver for building that culture of data-driven decision-making on campus, which we all know we're all in different places there. So yes, you should switch. And right now is a great time to start making a plan to do that. So let's talk a little bit about content development after that gloom and doom. Do you know your audience? Is there an established process for content creation? And is your content unique, storytelling, and on brand? I'm a huge content strategy Christina Halverson fan. I can't tell you how important content development and having great content on your site is to inbound marketing. Content is the thing that's actually the hook that brings people in. So those great stories, the great headlines, the great videos, all of those different elements are so important. First thing that you really need to know as you're figuring out what type of content we need on our site is you need to know as much as possible about your audience. So a tool that we like to use at Converge is called a persona. And this is just an example one here. But you can use lots of different data. We have admission data. We use Experian data a lot, recruitment data. And then additionally, conducting those stakeholder interviews and focus groups on campus will give you a lot of information that you can put together what your really the rundown and who your student really is and who you're trying to go after. We like to give them an age and a name and an actual story so that as we're writing content and creating content for our sites, we really can picture this person. And actually, a lot of our personas are kind of half of someone that we actually know, and
part of campus,
right, part of someone that we met on campus, and then tied together with another person. So it makes it a lot easier to make sure that you have a consistent voice, because it's easy to talk to that one specific person.
Absolutely. I think one of the best parts of personas as well, whether you have 4 personas or whether you have 25 personas, is really being able to group messaging by audiences and identify that key information that's needed. And one of the things that we find most helpful when developing web content and thinking about information architecture is, what is the key information that this person's looking for when they come to my website? Do they need help in writing a personal statement? Are they interested in the ROI on your MBA program? What is the information that you most want to deliver? Because if they're looking for that information, not only will they find your website through effective SEO, but you're also addressing those questions through great content development.
So many of us who are involved in the actual content creation process, or maybe lack thereof process, I've been involved in several with different companies over the years. We know how important it is to establish that process and make sure that edits and audits and the creation process is all really smooth. So one thing that I definitely recommend that you work through is figuring out where your content is coming from and making a different flow for each one of those. So this is an example of marketing created content. It'll usually get requested through this request form, or else it might be a marketing initiative by either a program stakeholder or by the marketing team. So one of those 2 buckets, it goes into the creation phase next, where copy design and any interviews happen, which is typically handled by the marketing team and any subject matter experts that are needed. Then, of course, it needs to go through an approval process, where the email is sent so that there's approval by whomever needs to from that list below, whether it's the stakeholders. Sometimes there'll be brand standard folks that need to approve, or compliance if you have some legal issues. And then, of course, there's edits, going back, approvals again, and then entered and published by marketing. You can see how having this sort of a workflow and something like, for example, a request form might be a great way to funnel in all the different types of marketing requests that you're getting. The nice part there, especially, is right between requested and created, we know that it's going through that veil of marketing strategy as well. So any form that comes through, any marketing initiative, can go through our complete marketing plan for the year or the quarter as well, to make sure that it's on par.
This content development process is also really nice for your teams in helping you to prioritize what's the most important content to get developed first, second, third, and also really understanding and aligning your resources. If you're receiving 400 requests a week for content and have half of a full-time person working on this, you might not be able to reach all of those requests each week. So it really helps you to establish workflow, resources, and priorities.
Yep. And in fact, I've got a deck full of 7 or 8 of these for different types of processes. So it's definitely taking something that's complicated and trying to simplify it. Let's talk about a little bit about your content, whether it's unique, storytelling, and on brand. Hopefully by this point, you know a little bit about your brand, because you've gone through, previously we talked about having those brand standards. So now that we know what our brand is, how do we make sure that we're telling great stories in a way that's really unique and powerful? 2 ways beyond just, an article, that there is some amazing writing out there that's all of those things, but 2 ways to kind of punch it up are videos and infographics. Videos have a great way of actually showing instead of just telling, and connecting emotionally a little bit deeper. I don't know how many of you have videos on your site right now, but being able to really compile all of those, track them to see how much they're actually being viewed and how they're contributing to your site goals, and repurposing them in as many places as possible, because we know sometimes the budget there it needs to be repurposed, right? So making the most use out of those videos that you currently have. And then, of course, infographics. Anne actually has a great blog post, I think went live yesterday on our website, about infographics and how they're really good at telling stories visually.
The great thing about content development and use of different storytelling mechanisms, whether it be video or infographics, is that This information is easy for other news publications and sources to repurpose as well. So there are a number of business schools who have started doing infographics, and those are being referenced and purposed in major news publications like Forbes, but also in industry publications like Poets and Quants. So the reach of that information, again, that content is just amplified a lot because the visual presentation is so interesting and useful to the audience.
And that in turn is great for your SEO as well. Let's talk a little bit about recruitment. So we know who our audience is, but do we know what they want to hear? And I don't mean, what do they want to hear? We're going to sell them stuff. I mean, do we know what they're looking for? Do we know what problems they have so we can try to help solve them? Do you know what your budget or how to optimize your budget? So taking what we talked about in the paid media section one step further. And finally, do you know what your competitors are up to? So we know that we have our audience out there and we know who they are because we made some personas and we figured that out. But how do we figure out how to talk to those people? We like to use a tool called a message matrix. And really what this is figuring out what those major brand attributes are to your specific different types of personas. In this case, maybe it's a full-time MBA. And we're talking about the wonderful nature of the town of New Orleans, where this school happens to be. It's one of their selling features, which is what? Number 3 and number 1 best city in the United States ranked this year?
In the world.
Yay, New Orleans.
Yes. And Mardi Gras just got over.
Right. Happy Mardi Gras. So being able to say for this specific brand element and for this specific persona, what are the words that we want to use to really talk about this so that our writers not only have a picture of who they're talking to, but they have an understanding of what exactly the message needs to be for each one of these different personas.
This is where you can start to have some fun with your copy too, when you're talking about what's your career tune and wrapping that into the jazz culture of the city, using energy as a verb and a noun to not only describe the specific program experience, but also to marry that in with one of the great attributes of this school, being in an amazing city.
If you've ever been out to a website that you read through some of the pages and it might not be in higher ed, maybe it's one of just your favorite brands out there. I'm a huge fan of like Madewell. I love going out to their site and reading that they have this consistent brand throughout everything. And I feel like I'm talking to like this one person. I can almost imagine this person talking to me. You better believe that they have a message matrix like this. That's how that sort of thing happens. It's not because they have one person miraculously writing every page of their website. It's because they have a plan like this that, like Ann said, really is using the same verbiage and the same types of things throughout.
And the great thing about this is that we have the opportunity to not only use this in creation of recruitment copy, but we can also use it in press releases and blog posts, and as we're giving guidance to other writers and creators of content across our university. Absolutely.
It really does make it scalable.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about your budget. We talked about the great tools like Acquisio and having an overall dashboard. Let's take that one step further and figure out how are you calculating ROI on everything you're doing for recruitment. So we know the digital advertising with the search, display ads, email marketing, all of those different things. That's pretty, it's not simple, but it's something that is pretty trackable because you usually have a link and a point A and a point B that's all digital. So that's probably the easiest one to calculate our ROI on. So how are you currently tracking and trying to figure out your return on things like billboards, television, radio, actual hiring more people, recruiters to maybe attend some student fairs and the travel costs associated with those things? You probably also need to consider things like photography and video production, website and content, and anything else that you're putting towards really trying to boost that recruitment. So I'd recommend, once again, having just a large scale dashboard to be able to track all of these different things the best that you can. In some of these instances, we don't know exactly what the return will be. Although I've seen some really cool things done with vanity URLs with television and radio ads where you're sending somebody to a specific URL on your site, which then redirects to a tracked URL that we can track coming in. So there are some pretty cool things you can do there. I know other people also include the drop down on a form, where did you hear about us? sometimes that's a great way to attribute as well.
Yeah, and I think as we think about ROI on a larger level and the cost to recruit a student, oftentimes many of these different channels will impact that student's decision to actually attend our college or university. So tracking at each point in the funnel, which of these mediums they may have seen or engaged with, and then really looking at how do each of those individual actions or items attribute to the larger overall scale. So again, as Becky mentioned, we've seen some great dashboards from the very point of someone inquiring. We're asking those questions about touch points, and I might know it took one billboard, 3 emails, and a campus visit to get that student actually enrolled. Some schools are getting great specificity and level of detail on that, and that's how you can start to do a better job of calculating ROI and building budgets for the future.
And finally, do you know what your competitors are up to? So last summer, I believe it was, Brenda Harms and us went through and did a secret shopping exercise, and we actually had a webinar of it. So I wanted to share a little bit of that secret shopping with you here now. Basically, what we did is we had one of our employees go out and inquire at a bunch of different programs and record all of the interactions and the things that happened so that we could get a really good understanding of what is the competition doing right now. This full webinar again is on our website if you're fired up and interested about it. But some of the things that we learned, some of the most embarrassing things that happened during this. So all of you get ready to pat yourself on the back. At least you didn't do this. Allison, the girl who actually went and filled all this out, actually got an empty envelope in the mail from one school with the wrong name on it. She had goofed up phone messages, schools that never followed up at all. Can you imagine actually going and inquiring and saying, I am interested, I want to know more about you, and never hearing any follow-up? She had the unexpected answered phone call. She got some duplicated emails. There were typos galore, many unkept promises as far as, hey, I'm talking to you on the phone now, we'll send you a packet. Packet never showed up, things like that. The 30-day plus wait time. Obviously, she had some other options contact her by that point. And there was a couple of schools where she had the sense that they just really weren't that interested in her. It seemed like more of a checkbox on something that they had to get done, not that they were excited for her to attend that institution.
Absolutely. And as we think again about inbound marketing, about attract, convert, and delight, this is a huge part of that recruitment process, thinking about what is the next step in the process and how can I continue to nurture and keep that person engaged.
So some of the greatest successes that we saw. So there were some very positive things. Emails from real people, including their names and contact information instead of just a generic spammy feeling email. There were offers to connect students for financial aid to academic deans and for the for-profit for career services. So imagine not only saying, yeah, we'd love to have you here, but let me introduce you to some more people on campus that can help you out. There were also some free webinars on navigating financial aid, which for many students is going to be a make or break type of situation. If you're the one that teaches me how easy it is at your school to get this financial aid set up, you might just win me. It might be you're solving a problem for me. So like we were talking about previous, what are your students really looking for, prospective students? What are the problems they have that we can solve? Financial aid is always up on that list. There were open houses inviting you to come in and help with resume writing, finances, finding a job, things like that. The personal handwritten notes, love that, mailed with a packet. That still has a lot of value, and I think that it made a difference for our secret shopper at least. And then, of course, there's that feeling of just having people be really interested in you, not just in the fact that you might be another number coming to their school, but that they wanted you to succeed. So we're going to have a little bit of time in a couple of moments for questions, but I just wanted to wrap up and review. All of these different pieces are so critical in making sure that your website is really the hub for all the activity going on from an inbound marketing standpoint. So from the digital advertising with our brand, our SEO, our analytics, our content, and our recruitment, all of those pieces really, you probably saw as we were going through, play off of each other. And doing all of these things and completing this checklist, I think will get you in really good shape as far as having a website that's capable of producing leads for you.
And the most exciting thing for us at Converge is when we talk to clients and talk to folks in the industry is thinking about your website bigger than just your .edu, but thinking about it as a big part of your recruitment funnel and process, where again, you're bringing people in through attracting them, converting them, and then continuing to keep them delighted. So it really is that user path that we need to think about. And it is definitely an opportunity to have a larger conversation than just we need to redesign the website.
Absolutely. So if you have any questions, start typing them in. It looks like there's a couple already. We do want to tell you about our next webinar, which is coming up. Actually, it is the 19th of March. It's a weird two months where the 19th falls on a Thursday again. And we're doing programmatic digital advertising for higher education. Haley and Ryan are going to head this one off. If you're interested in any of the digital advertising piece that we talked about today, this is going to include a lot more on those. So all of the different remarketing, the segmentation tactics, the different networks that are out there, and they're really going to be able to answer a lot of specific, deep questions for you on those things.
Yeah, and there's new things happen daily with digital advertising. AdWords had some new updates yesterday with remarketing. Twitter cards are fairly new in the marketplace. There's a lot more information on kind of YouTube advertising and videos on Facebook. So I would definitely encourage you. Ryan and Haley have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the digital advertising marketplace. So it's a great resource where you'll be able to ask any specific questions that you want.
And of course, we've got to tell you, we have announced the dates for Converge 2015 in that wonderful city, New Orleans.
Not during Mardi Gras.
no, it'll be next October, or October 2015, the 21st and the 22nd. There will also be an awesome meetup the night before and a workshop the day after. So we already have confirmed speakers from Google, Moz, which is the SEO group that I mentioned previously, and HubSpot, the kings of inbound marketing. So we're really fired up about the lineup, and I hope you all join us.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into any of those questions. I saw one of the first questions was, how do you spell Acquisio? That's a great question. So Acquisio is actually a dashboard reporting tool that's based out of Canada, and it's spelled ACQUSIO. It's great. If anyone has any questions, definitely email Becky or myself, and we can provide you with the contact folks there. But it's one of we did a lot of work to evaluate dashboards and reporting tools for our own clients' paid media efforts. And through that robust process, we really identified them as the most innovative. And I think their real-time data and reporting allows you to do the very best job possible, maximizing your budget.
Yep, and these slides in the video will be available. We've recorded it for you. It's actually written out in that slide too, up in the digital advertising spot. So if you didn't catch what Ann said,
yes,
we got it for you. Next question. When talking budgets, do you have information on average monthly or annual spend higher ed institutions are spending?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually a tool called Redbooks that's available that allows you to see what has been spent not only on digital advertising, but also on traditional advertising. And some clients of ours have used that to gain some competitor insight. It really depends on, I think, the number of inquiries that you're looking for a program. So we have clients who are spending between $2,000 and $3,000 a month on different digital advertising channels. We have clients who are spending up to $100,000 a month on different digital advertising channels. And again, I think it's looking at by specific program, what are your goals? How hard is it and competitive is it to recruit for that program? MBA keywords notoriously are much more expensive than other programs. And so it really depends on the channels that you're on and then what your overarching goals are.
Yeah, great question. Any more questions coming in? Hold on a quick.
Becky, do you want to talk for a few minutes about universal analytics and the best way to start thinking about that process and how the complexity of it and actually getting Universal Analytics onto your site?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, it's really the actual transition process. If you have a website that has 5 pages on it and it's your personal website, beckyvardaman.com, took me about 3 seconds to update because all I had to do was change out the code on the template, and then go and click the button in the back end of analytics, and voila, I was updated. One of the things though that I find with most schools is as they contact us and say, hey, we need some help transitioning to Universal, we go through a process where we go and map out their entire website. So, I mean, everything. I mean, subdomains you haven't touched in a generation, maybe not that long, but in a decade. And we put them all in a giant spreadsheet and strategically figure out which of these things do we need to track and why. It's going to make a huge difference in your referrals. Some of you probably have heard of self-referrals. It's basically if your own website is referring traffic to yourself, which is obviously bad because you can't understand where people are really coming from. So we can clean up those self-referrals by doing this giant spreadsheet and putting together a plan of where we're going to put the new code with Universal Analytics. Then you can implement that code and, like I talked about before, set up any events and goals that you need to track those things and end up with wonderful, clean dashboards with data that you actually can count on and believe in and is accurate.
Great.
So that's usually the process.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Excellent. Well, it looks like that is about it. We'll stay on for another minute if anybody has any other questions. But for all of you for joining us, we want to give you a giant thank you. And of course, this has been recorded and it will be emailed out